Hey everyone, it's me Lone, hope you're doing alright. Let's talk about Obsidian's Avowed. Obsidian announced Avowed over 2 years ago now, but unfortunately since then, we haven't really heard much about the game, officially anyways. So what I thought I'd do in today's video is answer the question, what the hell has happened to Avowed? I've done a bunch of research, all the sources for which are linked in the description below, and we're going to try and cover everything major that we know about the game as of today. So if you enjoy this video and all the new content that I'm producing, please do like it. It really does help push the video out to more people. As always, subscribe if you're new. But with all that out of the way, let's try and answer the question, what the hell has happened to Avowed? Avowed was first announced by Obsidian back in 2020 on July 24 during the Xbox Game Showcase in that year. The game was officially penned as an epic first-person RPG set in the fantasy world of Eora, the very same world as the Pillars of Eternity franchise. Of course, as part of the reveal, it was stressed that the game will be coming day one to Game Pass, both on console and PC, and that the game will be optimized for Xbox Series X and S. The trailer looked phenomenal. While it was clearly a pre-rendered CGI trailer, it offered us a glimpse into a brand new RPG game that very much felt like Elder Scrolls, which was noteworthy at the time and indeed even still today, as we are still many years off from Bethesda Game Studios' Elder Scrolls 6, a title that Avowed is seemingly trying to compete with, though this phrase holds a little less meaning today now that Bethesda and Obsidian are both Xbox-owned studios. Keep in mind too that Phil Spencer said he saw Avowed and Elder Scrolls being very different. Speaking on an IGN podcast, Phil said, "I think the games are very different, so maybe I struggle a little bit to say that's our version of this, just knowing what Obsidian and the team are going off to do. But when I think about our lineup and I think about the more core fantasy RPG setting, I think Avowed is going to be an awesome entrance there." And while it wasn't much, the trailer gave us some indication as to what both the story and the gameplay could be like. The world is one that has been ravaged by wars which helped forge an empire and created kings and queens. But this empire did something bad that caused many monsters to spawn, and there is an emphasis on oaths and those being lost. Games Radar speculates that due to the phrase, "is an oath worth the weight of a crown?" the main character might be of royal descent, and the plot of the game is this character confronting their fate and looking to rebuild the fallen empire. In terms of gameplay, we see the character in question dual-wielding a sword in one hand and some kind of magic in the other, again reminiscent of games like Skyrim. The scene also hinted at an incoming large enemy made of flames, which felt very much plucked out of The Lord of the Rings, specifically the Durin's Bane Balrog segment in the first movie. What's also cool is that viewers of the trailer on Reddit noticed that the sword being held by the character had runes on the blade in the same Adrian script from the Pillars of Eternity games, and they are translated to read Oathbinder. Then, in another post on Reddit, user Catfoot1 said that the symbol featured on the castle in the trailer is a slightly different version of the symbol of Wodika, a deity in the Pillars of Eternity franchise who goes by many names, including the Exiled Queen, the Burned Queen, the Strangler, and, get this, Oathbinder. Using this information, Stephen Messner on PC Gamer speculates that the game could actually be a prequel to the Pillars of Eternity franchise. Jordan Ollerman of Games Radar said something very similar, in how because the combat is sword and magic based, the game might be a medieval prequel to Pillars of Eternity, since that game includes more Renaissance modes of combat such as flintlock pistols and crossbows. Keep in mind this as we talk about some leaks by Jez Corden later in the video. But even though Avowed's announcement was now over 2 years ago, we haven't really heard much else about the game. Many large games events have come and gone, including those held by Xbox itself, and we haven't seen further gameplay, we still don't know what the release date is going to be, and we don't even really know how the development of the game is going. Obsidian has gone all but quiet on the title, so what the hell has happened? Well, one thing is for sure, Obsidian has been a very busy studio as of late, especially for a studio of up to only around 300 developers in size. Obsidian just released Grounded, their cooperative survival video game, on 27 September this year. Then we have Pentiment, a 16th century narrative adventure spearheaded by Josh Sawyer. Pentiment has been in development for 4 years now and is set to release on 15th of November this year. And then last year, in the Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase of 2021, Obsidian also announced that The Outer Worlds 2 is in development as well, a sequel to their space RPG game released in October 2019. Funnily enough, in that announcement trailer, Obsidian joked explicitly about how the devs haven't finished the design, story, or any of the gameplay of the game. So, suffice it to say, it is very likely that The Outer Worlds 2 is many years off as well. So where might that leave Avowed? Well, judging by the Outer Worlds 2 trailer, I get the feeling that the Outer Worlds 2 is only in very early pre-production and will likely release after Avowed. With Grounded just being released and Pentiment soon to come out, it's my guess that the majority of the studio will then move on to developing Avowed. Now, that's not to say that the game hasn't already been in development, but it's clear that a decent bulk of the team at Obsidian has been very busy with those other projects, which is probably why we haven't seen anything else about Avowed. But if we dig a little deeper, we can see that additional information and rumours for Avowed exist on the internet, which help shed a little bit more insight on the game. In 2019, Obsidian posted job listings for a title that, after the announcement trailer, seems to refer to Avowed. A great article on PC Gamer drew out some of the key phrases about the title from these job listings, which stated that the game is Obsidian's next great multi-platform RPG, a high-profile AAA role-playing game. It's possibly being made in Unreal Engine, and there will be first-person melee combat gameplay, combat with an emphasis on exceptional first-person melee experience, and combat actions utilizing both first and third-person animations. The listings also mention branching dialogue, conversations and cutscenes, and day-night cycles. Now keep in mind that it's very likely these job listings were also referencing a second title, Grounded, as some of these phrases refer to third-person animations and network and multiplayer gameplay systems using Unreal Engine. I don't think these references at all suggest that Avowed is going to have multiplayer components, especially as Obsidian has confirmed the game will only be in first person, and Grounded is of course in third person. Importantly, there's also been other job listings posted by Obsidian since then, which have suggested that the game will be open world as opposed to being a hub system like the Outer Worlds. Interestingly, on 13th of June 2021, Obsidian studio head Fergus Urquhart released an article on Xbox Wire, which while primarily speaking about the Outer Worlds 2 and Grounded, made a very small mention about Avowed. Specifically, Fergus said the following: "For those who are wondering about Avowed, the team is hard at work making something we're sure fans of our games and the Pillars of Eternity universe are going to love. While we're not showing anything right now, we are looking forward to showing off what we have been working on soon." So that pretty much wraps up all the official information that we know about Avowed coming from Obsidian directly. However, as I mentioned in the intro, there's been a lot of leaks about Avowed which I think we need to cover in this video. Now you're going to have to take a lot of this stuff with a grain of salt, but I do think we need to pay especially close attention to what Jez Corden has written about Avowed, because he is very much a credible and legitimate games journalist, and I believe that he's actually seen gameplay about Avowed, so let's see what he's had to say. In October of last year, Jez Corden on Windows Central posted a bunch of information that he gathered about the game from, and I quote, "via trusted and proven sources familiar with Microsoft's plans for the future of Xbox." There is a lot to go through here, and I do encourage you to read the full article in the description below, but here are some of the main paragraphs talking about the game. Sources familiar with internal plans have reached out to us in recent months offering details on Avowed, moving through pre-production towards a playable alpha state. Indeed, Obsidian is likely close to having a working early version of the game, with many mechanics and core gameplay pillars already implemented. I can't be sure how old some of the footage I've seen is, and there's a good chance it's far further along. Avowed seems to be based on a similar, albeit enhanced engine from the Outer Worlds, complete with action-oriented first-person combat and deep RPG exploration and narrative systems. We were told Avowed will feature multiple class playstyles and borrow from Skyrim's two-handed combat system. You could wield two daggers and be a stealthy rogue, or dive into archery with a two-handed bow. You could use a combination of swords and magic, or go full two-handed magic, which is required to wield some of the game's more potent spells and abilities. Avowed will feature many elements Pillars of Eternity fans will be familiar with. Wizard spells like Jolting Touch, which can fry enemies with forks of lightning, will be present. Two-handed spells like Fireball are conjured using complex-looking hand gestures, but decimate enemies in a storm of magma and fire. I also saw status effect spells like Fetid Caress, imbuing enemies with corrosive poison. Weapon enchantments seem to be a big feature too, with magically enhanced swords and frozen arrows as examples. Pillars-style guns may also appear in the game, similar to the muskets and arquebuses found in the original two titles. Familiar creatures such as the lizard-like Zorops will appear alongside much larger and deadlier threats, all the way up to wyverns and drakes. The combat seems to be more loadout-based in the Elder Scrolls, which gives you mountains of spells in a gigantic list. Warriors will get access to more physical attacks like swordplay, powerful kicks, and shield bashes, while casters will be given a range of spellbook options to customize and tailor their combat style, with attacks bound to specific buttons. At least directly compared to the likes of Skyrim and Oblivion, Avowed seems to be a far more colourful game, reminding me far more of the Outer Worlds. Luminescent cave mushrooms, verdant forests awash with gigantic flora, and hulking sunlit temples complete with skeleton-infested depths and tombs are plentiful. It came as a bit of a surprise given the game's original trailer, which seemed like it was trying to strike a much darker tone, save for the neon spell effects. Pillars of Eternity does seem to take environmental interactivity a bit further than the Outer Worlds 2, complete with swimming capabilities. We've even heard of destructible aspects of environments using lit torches and fire spells to burn down blocked entryways, for example. Fire spells leave areas coated in flames too, which cascade against walls and floors. The content I saw does represent a pre-alpha state with certain aspects like lighting and textures not fully implemented, which is one reason I'm not sharing the documentation I've been shown. The finished art style is expected to elevate what we saw in the Outer Worlds though, with a brighter, more lively colour palette, although it could end up looking a bit darker akin to the debut trailer. I only saw a couple of areas, although it could represent the diversity of locale styles Obsidian aims to deliver. Now, what's very interesting here is that Jez speculated that given the quality of the content he saw, he expected to see Avowed in a playable state at E3 2022, which of course we didn't see. He also guessed that the game could appear at the Game Awards 2021, which again didn't happen. However, the information does not end there. There have been loads of other rumors posted online by other allegedly credible Microsoft insiders. And while I think this information should definitely be taken with much more of a grain of salt than that information spoken about by Jez Corden, I'm still going to be covering it for the purposes of this video. On Resetera, a member by the name of Sponger said that they received the following information about Avowed. I'm going to be reading it verbatim, so I apologize in advance for any grammatical errors. Quote, fully open world, much larger than Skyrim, very differently larger, more proper word would be denser and more contrasted at the same time. Primarily set in the Living Lands region of Eora. Not sure if it'll go like that as explicitly later on, but that was the starting point. Big focus on world reactivity, lighting, and next-gen AI systems and physics. Special focus on physics with magic systems, have no clue what that would mean. Real-time weather system, don't have full details but fog is very important as real-time element rivers will have specific microphysics systems regarding this. Very advanced character creation tool, didn't get more info. Mod support, for now PC is/will be very dominant as creation tool, but it'll be playable fully on Xbox. Very large number of factions, but very different approach than with Skyrim. You'll be able to have companions, different than Outer Worlds. Story set, fight against incoming threat of tyranny, independent from previous stories. Game has bosses planned and some of them are very large. Gods will have a special say in the game. Great focus on iconic landmarks, statues and buildings. 2 large cities planned with many smaller ones with a strong focus on contrasting wild areas, rivers, mountains and desolated areas. Yes, you'll be able to swim. Fully respecting PoE creatures lore with new additions. Dynamic presentation of dialogue. For now, idea is to keep you can kill everyone in the game option. Around 100 people are on the project for 2 years, smaller number for 7 months of pre-production, in total 2 years and 7 months. Full production is already a thing, team will still grow, target date late 2022/early 2023. Now again, I cannot confirm or deny the credibility of Sponger as an insider, but what is noteworthy is that Colobrial on Twitter, who is known for their Xbox coverage, verified that Sponger is indeed legit, so do with that information what you will. Next up, we are back with Jez Corden again, revealing more information about the game. During a Defining Duke podcast episode with my boy Mr. Matty Plays in June of this year, Jez followed up with the following information about Avowed. He's seen gameplay for Avowed, a 100% combat-focused demo. It looks like a colourful Skyrim. The gameplay footage was very old, likely in pre-alpha or alpha. It has the Pillars of Eternity DNA with the same enemies and spells. The world is interactive. Gameplay where a character was burning down a door with a torch and kicking a dude Spartan style with enemy ragdoll effects. The game is set in the Living Lands in the Pillars of Eternity universe. There was stealth gameplay with a dude holding daggers backstabbing an enemy. There of course was bow and arrow gameplay with a dude shooting magical arrows. And there were even guns as well, specifically Pillars of Eternity 1700 style muskets, not machine guns. In that podcast, Jez also confirmed that while he doesn't know when Avowed is actually releasing, everything that he's seen so far for the game has looked pretty good and he wouldn't be surprised if the game was released in 2022. Now keep in mind, he said this back in June and we're almost in November, so the chances are probably very low for this, but maybe we still might see gameplay by year's end. To follow on from this too, in an episode of the Xbox Expansion Pass podcast on 19 September this year, games journalist Jeff Grubb said that Avowed was originally looking at a 2023 release. According to Jeff, Xbox had 9 games planned for 2023, which included Avowed, Hellblade 2, Fable 4, Contraband, Perfect Dark, and Everwild. Again, Jeff Grubb is also a very legitimate and credible journalist, so I believe this schedule is real. There's also a strong chance that it's now out of date as well. And finally, we have one more major leak to cover about Avowed. Recently, you might have seen an alleged screenshot for Avowed leak online. In a now deleted tweet, again, Jez Corden shared this image of Avowed, which if legit, and I believe that it is, shows the game's dual-wielding combat and use of magic and spells. But Jez since confirmed that the image was not actually shared by him initially. It was posted on a random Discord server. However, he did say that the image is real and is from an old build. And based on the timing, it could have been from the same build that Jez first reported about in October of 2021, though that's just my speculation. This would also be the very first image of Avowed's actual gameplay that we've seen too, as the announced trailer, as I mentioned, was pre-rendered CGI, and this image seems to be of actual gameplay. But are things really all rainbows and butterflies when it comes to Avowed's development? Well, according to Jez again, apparently not. In an additional tweet which is still up, Jez tweeted the following: "They, Obsidian, did change up the team and change up the creative directors, but the result was a better pace of speed and a better vision. The first vertical slice under this new direction came a lot more quickly. Direction of the game changed in a good way in my opinion, which I'll talk about someday." Alright, that was a lot of info, I know, so let's take a step back and talk about my opinions when it comes to Obsidian and Avowed and just what the hell has happened to that game. From my perspective, I think it's clear Obsidian might have bitten off a little more than they can chew in terms of the projects that they've taken on, right? So we have Pentiment, we have Grounded, we have The Outer Worlds 2. Even though that's a little bit further out, I think further out than Avowed, they're still working on it. Some work has still been done on it. And then you, of course, have Avowed. They have a lot of projects, and especially a lot of projects for a development studio of their size. If you actually look at the size of Obsidian as a studio, as a AAA studio, they're not that large. There are some AAA studios out there with thousands of employees, and then you look at Obsidian, which has upwards of 300 employees, right? They are very much on the smaller side. They are smaller than BGS, and BGS is also a pretty small AAA game size studio, right? So when you look at that from that perspective, and you see all the projects that they have on board, and then them saying, all right, we're going to take on this huge, or what seems to be a huge game in Avowed, of course, it's clear to see why maybe Avowed hasn't been released already, or why we haven't seen much more info about that game. I think they're almost too busy, in my opinion. And I've talked about this in the past before. It's very hard, even for a studio like Obsidian, with their track record, it's very hard to hire a lot of good people fast. It's incredibly difficult. Like the jobs market, maybe not so much today, but 6 months ago, a year ago, it was an incredibly competitive jobs market in the tech sector and the games development sector, the programming sector in particular in the US. Incredibly competitive recently, and I would still say today it's very competitive, especially with employees wanting more flexibility. They want to work from home, they want more money, they want more benefits. It's difficult for a studio like Obsidian to hire a lot of good people very fast. So you can't just be like, oh, scale up Obsidian, what's wrong with you? It's not that easy, right? They of course have Xbox backing them, but Xbox is backing a bunch of other studios as well, including Bethesda. So they can't scale up that fast, but they still want to do all these projects and work on these games. So I think, yes, they've bitten off a little bit more than they can chew. But when you actually look at all the leaks and the rumors about Avowed, it seems to be shaping up pretty nicely. I don't think we haven't seen more info about the game because it's in a bad state. I think we just haven't seen it because they're slowly working on it, and these things take time. I trust Jez Corden when he says that the game is in a pretty good state. I think maybe he jumped the gun a little bit when he said, well, maybe we could have seen a release in 2022. But still, I trust him that the game is looking good. It's feeling really good. If it was looking and felt that good, we probably should have seen gameplay by now, maybe. But I think it's the base is very much there. I trust him that it's in a good state, but it's just not at the stage where they're ready for a full gameplay reveal. And I definitely don't think it's going to be released this year. That's for sure. If I was to have a guess, all right, this is my guess. If we were going to see gameplay, the earliest would be the Game Awards this year in December, right? I think that's probably the most likely event that it would take place at. But just based on the progression of things and how coy Obsidian has been and how radio silent that they've been, I think there's a good chance that the game, or the reveal of the game and the gameplay, could be pushed back until the Xbox Game Showcase. Because if you remember, when they did the Xbox Game Showcase when was it? The last one that just took place, right? This year. They said that every game that we talked about in the showcase was going to be coming out within the year, right? And that would have taken us up to June of 2023, so next year. And that, of course, didn't include Avowed. So I can't see Avowed suddenly being within that 1 year release window, especially when we know games like Starfield, for instance, are definitely coming. At least I think they're still coming in the first half of next year, just like Xbox promised, right? So I don't see Avowed coming out early next year at all. What I see happening, in my opinion, this is my guess, at the Xbox Game Showcase next year, or whatever Xbox is doing with E3 and all that kind of stuff, around June, July, I reckon we see the gameplay reveal for Avowed at that event, because Xbox does need all these exclusives, all the titles that are going to be filling up Game Pass. They need those titles to fill a show like an Xbox Game Showcase. So I think Avowed will probably be one of, if not the pillar title there after all the release of Starfield has happened. I think Avowed's going to have its gameplay reveal, and it might get released later in 2023. If it's not later in 2023, it could actually be 2024. But I think late 2023 is actually a pretty good bet. I think Xbox might do the same thing. They might do their next Xbox Game Showcase and be like, yes, again, everything we're talking about is coming out within the next year, and Avowed's going to be part of that. So whether it's late 2023 or early 2024, who really knows? But I'm still hopeful. I still think from what I've heard and seen of the game, and by heard, I mean heard publicly from other people. I don't have any secrets, I promise. But what I've seen of the game, everything looks really promising. I genuinely think that Avowed can be, calling it a stopgap until Elder Scrolls 6 is not doing it, or it is doing it a disservice, right? But I think it could be a really well-placed title to help people at least scratch their Elder Scrolls 6 and Elder Scrolls itch until a game like Elder Scrolls 6 does come out, whenever the hell that is, 5 years from now, 6 years from, like, that title is probably so far off. I think Avowed is perfectly placed in that regard. But is it going to be enough of it doesn't need to be a competitor to Elder Scrolls 6, mind you, but in terms of people's comparisons mentally, they're going to compare that game to what Elder Scrolls 6 could be, or even to Skyrim. So long as it's, just as big, just as expansive, has all the quest lines, the gameplay isn't as buggy, because that's always a big issue when it comes to BGS games, at least. So long as it's ticking those boxes, I think it's going to be an incredibly successful game. Whether it's I don't think it's going to reach the heights of Skyrim or an Elder Scrolls game. Like, let's be clear about that. I think it'll be more successful than Outer Worlds 2 or Outer Worlds, because Outer Worlds was a bit more of a smaller game. I think it needs to be open world to be more successful. It can't be hub-based. If it is hub-based, then I think that's going to let a lot of people down. If this is trying to be an Elder Scrolls-esque game, it needs to be open world. It needs to be massive. And we'll see if a development studio the size of Obsidian can actually, meet that. So anyways, I've rambled on long enough. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.